Tonight's big stories. U.S. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump face off in the first presidential debate heading into the November U.S. elections. Who got the upper hand today? We'll be discussing that with analyst Don McLean-Hill.
China calls on the United States to stop tolerating and supporting the Philippines' supposed provocations in the disputed West Philippine Sea.
And as more revelations about her identity comes to light, the Comelec ICE cases versus suspended Mayor Alice Go for misrepresentation.
Welcome to the big story. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Riza Diaz.
And I'm Sean Yao.
U.S. President Joe Biden and his predecessor Donald Trump faced off in the first presidential debate for the upcoming U.S. elections, giving the world a sneak peek on what's in store for this year's race to the White House.
That's right, Gretch. The two candidates exchanged views and insults over a range of topics, which include conflicts that the United States is involved in and their capacity to govern in their sunset years.
One News had an extensive coverage of that debate earlier today, and if you missed it, here's what went down.
President of the United States, Joe Biden. Donald Trump.
The first debate of the 2024 U.S. elections kicked off between Democrat President Joe Biden and returning Republican candidate Donald Trump. This is their second time going head-to-head in a debate since squaring off back in 2020. Same as last time, there was no handshake to kick off the debate hosted by CNN. The two answered questions on a range of topics, including immigration, economic policy, and geopolitical conflict. Trump wasted no time accusing Biden of driving the country into war. The United States is currently embroiled in various armed conflicts, specifically by aiding Ukraine in its war against Russia and Israel in its fight against Hamas over in Gaza.
We're a failing nation right now. We're a seriously failing nation. And we're a failing nation because of him. His policies are so bad. His military policies are insane. They're insane. These are wars that will never end with him. He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him, they don't fear him.
Biden responded by citing the United States' role as a global big brother.
And right now, we're needed. We're needed to protect the world because our own safety is at stake. And again, you want to have a war, just let Putin go ahead and take Kyiv, make sure they move on, see what happens in Poland, Hungary, and other places along that border. Then you have a war.
Biden, on the other hand, hit Trump for his role in instigating the January 6, 2021 storming of Capitol Hill.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill.
The debate also touched on abortion, and Trump, who backed the overturning of the landmark Roe v. Wade decision, which protected the rights to abortion, had this to say.
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion bill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
The two senior candidates were also asked about concerns over their age and whether they are fit to run the biggest economy in the world. Here's what Biden, 81, and Trump, 78, had to say.
But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, you know, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way, and I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
Many pundits have weighed in on the two candidates' performance in the 19-minute debate, and many seem to think that Biden stumbled over his answers and clearly had a hard time communicating his statements. His team had said that he was suffering from a cold, and clearly that did not do him any favor in the talking battle against Trump. Democrats are reportedly alarmed following Biden's performance.
Making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
The former president, on the other hand, tended to lean on exaggerations and grandstanding statements, which many say have not had enough fact-checking from the CNN team. The U.S. presidential debate caters mostly to the American electorate and covers domestic issues. In the meantime, political observers, including those here in the Philippines, continue to look for cues on the possible outcome of the U.S. election in November and how it would impact Philippine-U.S. relations. Aryan Kalumbiran, We Are One News.
Still on that high-stakes debate, U.S. President Joe Biden and former President Trump also clashed in their discussion of the U.S. trade disputes with China. During the debates, Trump accused Biden of being afraid to deal with China, going as far as claiming that Biden takes money from Beijing. Trump also believes that Biden is raising the risk of global conflict, noting that leaders from China, along with Russia and North Korea, do not respect Biden.
We have the largest deficit with China. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
Now, speaking of China, their foreign ministry has called on the United States to stop tolerating and supporting provocations supposedly done by the Philippines. They said this after Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell raised serious concerns about China's aggressive actions in the disputed West Philippine Sea.
The root cause of the current tense situation on Renai Reef is that the Philippine side has turned its back on the consensus reached with China, challenged China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and insisted on delivering large quantities of construction materials to the illegally grounded warship, thus permanently encroaching upon Renai Reef. The United States side should stop tolerating and supporting the Philippines' provocations and nuisances and take practical actions to safeguard peace and stability in the South China Sea.
Joining us on this Friday night to help us unpack that 90-minute presidential debate with only 2 commercials is Don McLean-Gill, a geopolitical analyst and lecturer over at the De La Salle University. Don, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's your pleasure.
Okay, so obviously we wanted to get your thoughts on that debate in terms of both the format, the way they moderated it and turned off the microphones when it's not the speaker's turn, as well as, of course, the performances of both Biden and Trump. What did you make of it?
Well, generally, there were concerns over the performance level of President Biden and, of course, former President Trump's consistent dodging of questions and giving misinformed answers, making it seem like 2 extremes in 2 different categories, right? So on one hand, you have President Biden not showing up in peak condition, and despite making some important points during the debate, these were all outweighed by the level of delivery. But on the other hand, you have former President Trump, who was, taking every opportunity to demean the current president to his advantage, but not really being able to answer the questions directly. So, there were also concerns over the latter's use of generalized statements that are not really necessarily backed by facts. So, for instance, when talking about completely cutting off any country's economic relationship with Iran, China continued to engage in commercial relations with Tehran. So, that's one point. So, of course, this was a disappointment of many American voters, who have voiced their concerns on social media. However, a relatively equal concern it has been, is being heard from the international community as well.
Okay, Don, let me read to you some headlines after that debate. For CNN, it was a disastrous debate for Biden, disastrous for the Democratic Party, for the re-election, and throws that re-election bid into crisis. For The Guardian, they say that Biden struggled to land his lines as Trump lies. Al Jazeera says Biden falls flat versus Trump. The Forbes says Biden loses train of thought and corrects himself repeatedly. ABC says Biden's biggest weakness is age on full display. Just taking a look at the poll, it seems that Trump won this one. An instant poll tells that the audience voted for Trump. 67% went to him, 33% to Biden. Do you think they got this correct, that Trump won this round?
Well, Gretchen, at the end of the day, optics matter a lot, especially in these forms of engagements, right? So there were already concerns over the ability of the current president to deliver, given, of course, a number of issues that were witnessed throughout the last 4 years regarding his level of delivery. But of course, the main point here was that most of the discussions were really rerouted into the competition between both candidates at the individual level, and thus a lack of substance in actually addressing pressing issues such as in foreign policy, for example, were overlooked. But of course, former President Trump was able to redirect the attention towards his ability to, his sharpness and his ability to sort of outweigh the delivery of the current president. So I think that made a huge difference when we look into public opinion, about this, to the point where even some analysts in other countries, such as in Japan, are actually anticipating that, all right, so we have to prepare for another Trump administration this time. So,
What does that mean, though?
A lot, as I mentioned.
Right, but Don, the question is, we all know that based on the polls, Trump did win that first debate with Biden, but the real question is, given the U.S. electoral system, which is not 1:1, as we know, they have the whole electoral college set up, will winning this debate or more debates moving forward, will these actually translate into votes?
Well, so far, we could definitely say that, within the Democratic Party itself, there are also concerns, and there have been concerns whether, they are treading in the right path, especially after this particular debate. But I think that this is nothing of a game changer in this regard. I've had a chance to engage with colleagues in the U.S. as well and talking about local politics. But they still believe, that there's also that fine line between the two candidates. But of course, based on this particular debate, we can clearly see that this was heavily in favor of the former President Trump. Bearing, of course, the idea of substance and the facts. There was a no fact-checking rule, I think, in this particular debate, so that diluted the importance of such a dimension. But this has definitely stirred a lot of conversation among policymakers and political circles as well.
Mm-hmm. Don, how do you think did former President Trump do on when he was asked about his conviction?
Well, he tried to dodge it a couple of times, and he tried to reroute it into other issues as well. And I think that this was pretty much consistent throughout the whole conversation, where most of the questions have been dodged and relocated towards perhaps the promotion of his campaign. It has been sort of a campaign rallying cry as well, and there were a couple of times when it was redirected towards immigration. So we could definitely see that there was this recognition of the challenge of that question, but of course there was more willingness to redirect it away from the question itself.
I do remember that he questioned the integrity of the judges in one of the cases that he was convicted at, saying that they were democratic, and in fact, donations poured in to his campaign. How does the U.S. Electorate usually deal with convicted politicians, for one? Like we know in the Philippines, minsan napapalagpas yung mga ganon eh. How about with the U.S. voting population? Do these things affect them, or is there such a thing as a sympathy vote?
To add to Gretchen, Don, we do know that, of course, Trump is the first former president to have been convicted. So do we have any precedent as to how the American people would perceive a conviction?
Well, clearly, if you look into public opinion surveys all around the United States, these cases loom large in the consciousness of the people, of course. But there's also that equal concern of whether the current president is stable enough to continue leading. And of course, with just two options, it's quite difficult as well for the people to decide. And given, of course, the limitations as well. So it's not to say that these cases have not catalyzed a challenge for former President Trump. But on some occasions, we could see that such cases have in fact amplified and promoted the position of former President Trump. In such opinion polls. So we could definitely see that given the two options, of course, and the ability of the former president to still run. And in fact, there was this interesting point that was asked to him during the debate was that, former President Trump was talking about getting back at his political rivals. And he was asked to clarify what he actually meant, especially since his biggest political rival was standing next to him. But of course, he tried to deflect that situation as well by stating that, oh no, what I meant by that was my main point of retribution was, of course, again, going back to the campaign slogan, making America great again.
Don, did you expect President Joe Biden to perform this poorly? Safe to say he did perform poorly based on feedback from the audiences and what we saw earlier today. But did you expect that? What do you think went on in his camp?
Well, I mean, objectively speaking, I was quite interested with the fact that a lot of, media reports were acting as if, it was not, it was something new. And I think that if we try to look into the manner in which the president has spoken throughout the years, and there were concerns, there were flags that were being raised towards the ability of the current president to continue, with a significant level of intensity. So in that regard, I don't think that it was something relatively new, to the point where some newspapers were trying to make out of it. If we looked into the past few years, we could definitely say that such a concern was already raised much earlier on.
You're right. That's how Sleepy Joe came about. All these memes with Biden on it.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right. He also has a stutter, which is publicly acknowledged and all of that. And we do know that President Trump, of course, is a professional TV guy, a professional TV host. So he does have that on his side. But let me bring it back here to the Indo-Pacific. Actually, let me bring it first to China. Who do you think China would prefer between the two?
Well, here's the thing, right? Under the current Biden administration, there's a lot of push towards a value-driven approach in foreign policy, and that is to, of course, address the China challenge based on the metrics of like-mindedness and preserving the rules-based order. And we can clearly see that there has been, a great focus as well on the lack, pursuing a lack of ambiguity in President Biden's current approach, such as towards Taiwan. I'm not saying that there's completely no lack of ambiguity, but the level of ambiguity is quite less, to the point where even President Biden's generals, the military of the U.S., have also agreed to the significance of having a less of an ambiguous position in the Western Pacific. So that's that. But if you look into the former president's position, what we could say is that if former President Trump would win this time. We are looking to a largely transactional approach, particularly towards China. So it's unfortunate, though, that in this particular debate, China did not really figure so much into the discussion, along with other pressing Indo-Pacific issues. But based on what we have seen in the past, we could definitely say that there is largely an effort to create this level of transaction with China, which is a good thing and could be a bad thing as well for many in the region. Some may worry that the level of transaction may result in some sort of de facto agreement between Washington and Beijing on economic fronts, particularly as we all know, former President Trump has pursued a hard line on economic relations with China for the benefit of the national economy. Whether it was effective or not is something up for another debate. But that was a hard line. It was economic relations, a deficit, right? So if Beijing is able to create some sort of agreement with Washington, there are also concerns whether Washington may ease up on certain commitments in the region as well. So, as of now, all we can do is speculate based on what we have seen in the past, and given, of course, a lack of comprehension towards such issues in this debate.
Let me, Gretchen, quickly reframe that question. For the Philippines, right, we spoke to a bunch of analysts here also. They seem to be of the opinion that American policy is pretty much, how do I say this, consistent, right? No matter who wins. But do you believe that it is actually that level of consistent that no matter which of them wins, we shouldn't really be affected that much more?
Right. So if you look into the general trend of U.S. grand strategy, of course, one important aspect in this would be the preservation of the U.S. alliance network, right, and its growing partnerships. And of course, the deep-rooted institutional foundations of U.S. foreign policy is definitely, it's definitely geared towards that direction. We call them, we call this particular institution the blob, which is somewhat consistent. What ensures consistency in this particular grand strategy. But as we can see in the past, Trump had the desire to, push back against that particular institutional foundation. But of course, with certain limitations as well. Now, as for the Philippines, what we could expect that, under the, previous Trump administration, we should also recognize that Washington overtly rejected nearly all the claims of China in the greater South China Sea, to the point that the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, that time took a more confrontational position against Beijing. And in fact, the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, was the one, who clarified on the geographic scope of the MDT, which was not done even under former President Obama, right? However, being a transactional leader, there are concerns that Trump may abandon, as I mentioned, key areas of commitment, and he would expect more from his partners, right? More from allies. And this is why Japan is also now considering the need to institutionalize partnerships further, if Trump does win. And, in order to lessen political shifts, right? Despite the continuity in the alliance. And, we have to also remember, lastly, I'll just make a quick point. When former President Trump was was the head 4 years ago, or rather a little bit more than that, we were under the administration of former President Rodrigo Duterte, and despite the outreach of Washington, we sort of gave the cold shoulder to the U.S. So it is not safe to, it's not right to say that we were, that we were maximizing our relationship with the U.S. then. So, but under President Marcos Jr., there's more initiative, the willingness for Manila to take up a greater role in the region. And this is something that I believe works well under a Trump administration. So in that regard, if the other camp wins, then we are likely to see continuity at the very least. But under a President Trump 2.0, with what we are doing, taking the initiative, engaging with more agency in the region, this is important. And this may be supplementary to that. But one last point, though, I'm sorry, this is very important as well, that we have to understand that the economic relationship may, of course, be challenged in some degree. What we were banking on is friend shoring, for example, rerouting U.S. investments towards friendly countries, would likely change under Trump, who focuses more on profit-based economic engagement. So this is an opportunity for us to cement our domestic investment climate in the Philippines to benefit more from that regard.
Don, former President Trump was blasting on President Biden regarding his military policies. He's saying, we're closer to World War III, and this guy's driving us closer to that. What do you think of those statements, and how will that actually affect, the voters' mindset come November?
Well, what former President Trump really banks on is the socioeconomic sentiments of the American people and their disdain for the fact that the United States is spending so much abroad when within the United States there's a lot of there are a lot of economic disruptions taking place, inflation, etc. So that's what the former president was sort of banking on when he was saying that Biden would be leading the U.S. towards a third world war. And his point here was that we need not expand on our resources to that extent. And this was part of the whole transactional idea. That he was saying that under his previous administration, he was able to get European countries to sort of spend more on their defenses. And he said that under the current president, there was this lack of initiative to push allies to spend more, to do more, right? And that would be counterproductive to the American people, right? So that was the line of focus. But on the other hand, President Biden, unfortunately, due to the lack of effective delivery, but he was still stating and making a point for the need for the United States to commit to its alliances and partnerships, right? So for us here in the Philippines, we definitely like that level of commitment, right? So this leaves on questions on how a transactional alliance would be like, if former President Trump comes in again, and especially in this time, he is more aware of the White House politics compared to how it was before. So there's more, there might be more speed in engaging in this regard. But definitely, the Philippines is crucial to the United States, whether it's a Trump administration or whether it's a Biden administration. What matters most would be the nitty-gritty details, the degrees of economic and political and defense cooperation. I believe that we have to do more in engaging and negotiating. And I think that what we have now is, is somewhat, I'm somewhat confident that we will be able to, address this political shift if it does happen.
Okay, Don, let's go to one of the things they argued about, which was abortion. We do know that President Biden cited Roe v. Wade, where abortion, they believe that it should the Constitution should protect fundamental rights to privacy, and that abortion is part of the civil rights of Americans, while Trump was against it, citing that he does have exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Knowing that the Philippines is quite conservative, it's a quite conservative country, what do you think? Who do you think do Filipino voters in the United States prefer? Do you have a pulse on that?
Well, initially, my main area of focus would be foreign policy. But, if we look into this, of course, this is in fact a touchy subject, especially with what you have just said, emotional, religious sentiments, together. But, based on my outlook, there are a lot of Filipino Americans who are actually very much supportive of the Republicans as well. So, this is something that we also need to take into consideration. So, the support would be multidimensional. So this may be, and it's all about the cost and balance, the cost and balance ratio, of whether they are able to sort of, they're able to sort of sideline particular interests as individual voters in exchange for more, more benefits promised by a particular leader. So, but definitely this would factor into the calculations of many. As similar to Filipino Americans, Indian Americans, I think that we come from, these communities are very much rooted in religious sentiment as well. But still, there are a lot more factors to be considered in voting. But definitely, this would be one of them. So it's all about managing the expectations and sort of, balancing the costs and making trade-offs, right? So trading off is definitely a huge part of the debates as to who you should choose to be the next president.
For sure, immigration policies as well as labor and employment play into that choice that you mentioned.
But also, again,
Absolutely.
every electoral decision, every vote that we make, it's always a cost-benefit analysis anyway. But
Right.
unfortunately, that's all the time we have for tonight. But thank you, as usual, for all your insights.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
But do
much for
come
having
back.
me, and I look forward to more discussions. Absolutely. I'll be back. I shall return. Anyway.
Okay, that's very World War
All right.
II of you, but thank you again, geopolitical analyst and DLSU lecturer Don McLean-Gill. A quick break for now. Right after that, is there a chance to forge a brand new unit team between the Marcos administration and the traditional opposition? We'll find out when we return. Welcome back. You're still with us here on The Big Story.
All right, let's focus now here, local. Should the traditional opposition parties unite with the administration to counter the Dutertes? Well, former Senator Antonio Trillanes pushed for this move following the fallout of the so-called uni team. But for opposition Senator Riza Ontiveros, it's not a good idea. Menos Baños with the story.
Opposition Senator Riza Hontiveros is not in favor with the proposal of former Senator Antonio Trillanes for traditional opposition to join forces with the Marcos administration. The goal, according to Trillanes, is to defeat the three Dutertes who are planning a run for the Senate in 2025.
Bagamat mahalaga mapigilan yung pagbalik sa ganap na kapangyarihan ng mga Duterte, at the same time, may mga unresolved issues sa ating kasaysayan ng mga human rights violations at plunder, panahon ng martial law dictatorship.
Because she's not running in the 2025 polls, Hontiveros is currently busy helping craft the senatorial lineup of the Liberal Party for the upcoming elections. For now, the opposition only has former Senators Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan and lawyer Chel Jokno as their candidates. The opposition aims to complete a lineup of 12 candidates. The opposition is hoping that former Senator Laila de Lima will join the slate, though she has already stated that she has no plans yet to run for office again. Hontiveros admits that there's a need for the opposition to grow in numbers. But if not with the administration, which parties can LP form an alliance with to form a solid opposition?
Actually, malawak-lawak pa yung opposition and oppositional groups na hindi pasok sa administrasyon at hindi rin aliado sa mga Duterte. Pag inanunsyo namin publicly yung aming mga kandidato para sa Senado next year, magsasama-sama na kaming lahat. So, tignan po natin. It's part of the work in progress.
In the 2022 elections, former Vice President Leni Robredo was the face and the leader of the opposition. As early as now, there have been talks about her running for mayor of Naga, but she is yet to make a formal announcement. Hontiveros hopes that Robredo will change her mind and consider running for the Senate instead. Meanwhile, former Senator Trillanes says he understands why the traditional opposition does not want to form an alliance with the Marcoses. With that, he said he will defer his proposal for them to join forces until formal talks on the matter have been held. Senator Bato de la Rosa, an ally of the Dutertes, says he sees no issue with the Liberal Party forming a coalition with the administration. If this happens, De La Rosa says that will officially establish the Dutertes as the real opposition.
Ganun ang pagtingin niya. Bakit, so, hindi na sila maging opposition, yung liberal. Magiging administration na sila kung mag-unite sila with Malacanang. Di ba? So, maging administration na sila. So, gusto nilang gawing opposition ngayon, yung Duterte.
For now, only De La Rosa and Senator Bongo are planning to run for senator under PDP. There's still uncertainty on whether Senator Francis Tolentino will continue running under the party or if he will be transferring. De La Rosa believes that if the Dutertes do run for Senate next year, as announced by Vice President Sara Duterte, the PDP party will just become stronger.
I know BP Sara, pagdating dyan sa ganung mga bagay, hindi yan siya pwede magbiro. Pag sinabi niya yan, malaki ang posibilidad na talagang mangyayari yan.
For News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Okay, moving on now to another story that has gripped the nation for the last couple of weeks, maybe even months. And the recent developments on Bamban Tarlac Mayor Alice Go's identity, different government agencies are now joining forces to file cases against her. The Senate is also confident that she will be held accountable for her supposed ties to illegal pogos. Ria Fernandez with the details.
For Senator Risa Hontiveros, Bamban Mayor Alice Go is a fake Filipino. The senator yesterday made public the result of the NBI fingerprint investigation that shows Mayor Go and Chinese Go Waping are one and the same.
Itong pag-match ng mga fingerprints ay pinakamabigat na ebidensya na para tanggalin si Mayor Alice Go sa kanyang pagka-upo bilang mayor. Dapat mapanagot siya sa lahat ng mga krimen na ginawa niya.
According to Hontiveros, aside from the qualified trafficking in person case against Go, which is a grave non-bailable offense, she might also face other repercussions like the cancellation of her birth certificate and other criminal cases if it is also proven that she stole the identity of a Filipino woman also named Alice Leal Go. Hontiveros also wants Go to face first her cases in the Philippines if it is decided that she will be deported. The suspended mayor missed the last Senate hearing citing physical and mental stress due to the proceedings. The Philippine Statistics Authority, on the other hand, said they cannot cancel Go's birth certificate for now as they don't have the power to do so. According to Assistant National Statistician Marisa Grande, what they can do in the meantime is to block access on Go's PSA records. This is the reason why the PSA sought help from the Office of the Solicitor General to act on not just Go's birth certificate but also of her 3 registered siblings, Sheila, Seaman, and Wesley.
Yung doon sa magkapatid, kasi registered yun sa Tarlac, na-establish na natin kasi walang mga requirements. And doon naman po sa dalawa na registered in Caloocan, nag-conduct na rin po kami ng ocular. However, hindi pa po namin nakuha yung mga documents. But yung based doon sa past na hearing, it was also confirmed by Senator Win na may irregularity doon. Kasi yung baptismal certificate ay hindi nga rin fake din siya. So, ibig sabihin, may problema din doon sa process ng delayed registration na ginawa doon sa dalawang kapatid.
Solicitor General Menardo Guevara did not give an exact date on when they will file for the cancellation of Go's birth certificate, but the official told News 5 that it's progressing very well with the recent development on Go's identity. But PSA admits, in the event that Go's birth certificate is cancelled, she can still acquire a Filipino status by marrying a Filipino. However, she needs to use her Chinese documents here. For Commission on Elections or COMELEC Chairperson George Garcia, Go can still file for candidacy for the 2025 elections pending the final decision of court on her quo warranto petition. So he has recommendations to hasten her termination from office.
At pagka naman po administrative, pwede makakasuhan sa Office of the Ombudsman, lalo na't may maling mga deklarasyon. O kaya naman po, ang DILG pwede magtanggal o mag-suspend kapag mali rin ang deklarasyon ng isang elected local official.
Soljan Guevara said that they target to file the quo warranto against Go in July. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, We Are One News.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News.
You're still watching the big story here on One News. Now, the camp of former Congressman Arnie Tevis is looking to appeal Timor-Leste's decision to grant the Philippines extradition request against him. But the Justice Department says Tevis could still be possibly arrested any moment now and be sent back to the Philippines. Department of Justice Secretary Raul Vasquez says the extradition request was granted as authorities at Timor-Leste found that there's no basis behind Tevis's claim that the Philippines judicial system is not working. Vasquez says that even if Tevis camp appeals the decision or this decision, he can still be arrested as the extradition hearing on the case has concluded. Tevis's Philippine passport has also been suspended for a while now, and so he can be considered an undocumented alien in Timor-Leste. Now, Tevis is the alleged mastermind in the killing of former Negros Oriental Governor Roel Degamo and 9 others back in 2023.
The judicial system is working, that the accused is under our constitution and under our statutes, the accused is granted so much rights and privileges that are not available outside of the Philippine jurisdiction. That we have a fair and impartial trial, and that would be heard by a fair and impartial judge.
But according to Tevis's lawyer, he still has 30 days left to appeal the decision of Timor-Leste court. They say it's also too early for the Department of Justice to declare this as a win.
Even if they do succeed in extraditing Mr. Tevis, we still have to go through the judicial process of the prosecution proving his guilt. At palagay ko mahihirapan silang gawin yan dahil nag-recant na yung kanilang mga witnesses.
So nga, no, merong 30 days to appeal the extradition at sinasabi ng kanyang lawyer na si Ferdinand Topacio na hindi pa naman na-deny with finality yung request for political asylum. So that's another case altogether.
So in short, ito yung the usual na nagpapadelay, nagpapahaba.
Merong
Bibigay
kaso, kumbaga.
Ano pa yung mga kaso? May
May
mga appeals time pa, motions for that. I mean, everyone does deserve that talaga. Ganun naman talaga yung justice system.
Yeah, yun yung proseso.
Pero, syempre, according to Mayor Janice Degamo, yung
wife.
widow
Yeah.
of the slain governor, sabi niya, of course, she's happy that Timor-Leste granted the extradition. But sabi nga rin ng Degamo family, nag-warning sila na may ginagawang paraan pa raw si Teves para manatili sa Timor-Leste. Sabi na nga, Degamo family lawyer, I'm going to quote, "Napag-alaman ko na merong nag-advise kay dating Kong Arnie Teves na mag-commit ng mga petty crimes na bailable naman para hindi na siya ma-extradite dahil kailangan litisin ang mga maliliit na kaso sa Timor-Leste mismo. Halimbawa, meron siyang sinuntok doon, kakasuhan siya ng physical injuries."
meron palang paraan na ganun.
May mga, there's a lot of ways around it pala.
Oo. Pero sabi naman ng DOJ that aside from the favorable decision on the extradition request of the Philippine government, Teves may be arrested by Timor-Leste authorities because that person subject of the extradition is already an undocumented alien from the point of view of Timor-Leste. Kasi
Wala na nga
yung Philippine passport.
Huwag rin natin kakalimutan no, na a couple of weeks ago, inaresto nila yung younger brother ni Kong Arnie, si Pride Henry Teves. Of course, it was a terror financing. So medyo malupit. He's out on bail. I think it was 600,000, but mukhang di pa tapos yung kalbaryo ng mga Teves. Pero mukhang may reprieve rin sila, so we'll see where it goes.
Patibayan ng depensa. No? Well, in case napansin ninyo, since the start of the newscast, we have been wearing different outfits tonight. We are actually wearing shirts that hold the statements of the Olympic campaign. At ito nga po yung talagang dahilan. The Paris 2024 Olympic Games are less than a month away. So ito nga ang ating tagline.
100 taon laban para sa bayan.
This is in celebration of the 100 years of, Filipinos competing and showing their excellence in the Olympics. So far, as of today, we already have 20 qualified Olympians that will compete in Paris. The Philippine Olympic is saying we might be expecting 2 more via the universality rule. So nevertheless, this is already a good thing. It's already a win for us because it surpasses the number of Olympians that we were able to send in Tokyo.
Yan i-connect natin.
19? Ito nga yung pinakamarami. Ito nga 2024, the biggest delegation from the Philippines. But wait, let's not forget our Paralympians.
Correct. Today is a very busy day and we received a lot of good news. 2 Paralympians natin na nag-qualify. So after the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games naman happen. And just as we celebrate our Olympics, we celebrate also our Paralympics.
That's correct. Dahil nga less than a month away ang Olympics, our athletes have already been deep in preparations for the Games. But today, our Centennial delegation joined the historical Olympic torch relay event held at Place de la Publique in Metz, France. Aside from our athletes, fellow Filipinos also joined the event and expressed their support to our athletes. Their participation in the torch relay is part of their 78-day journey in preparing for the upcoming Olympic Games, which kicks off July 26. Bakit nga ba 100 years? Kasi 100 years since the Philippines joined the Olympic Games.
Right. So 1924. Tama ba yung math ko?
I think so.
Okay, right before we go off on our weekend, here's our big picture tonight. What we are seeing, yes, that black dot in the middle, a Philippine eagle named Uswag being released in the forest of Cagbana in Burauen, Leyte earlier today. Uswag and another Philippine eagle, her mate named Carlito, or her pair, They were both released today as part of the first translocation project of these critically endangered birds. They were both rescued in Mindanao a few years before and now have found their new home at the Ano ng Lobi Mountain Range, a 60,000-hectare key biodiversity area. There were sightings of the Philippine eagle in that area in Leyte until Typhoon Yolanda ravaged the lands, according to the locals. Now, this effort to save our national bird is led by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR, and of course, the Philippine Eagle Foundation.
Teka, bakit nga ba in pairs pag describe itong eagle?
Monogamous kasi.
Mamamatay ba pagka mag-isa lang?
Well, I think the whole point is to bring them out of critically endangered status, right? And for that to happen, they have to have little eagle babies.
That's why they're always paired.
Right.
But also, but on top of that, ganun talaga yung mga eagles. Para silang, sabihin ko sana parang tao, pero parang mas
They
monogamous.
travel
Yeah, they thrive in pairs, and then each pair, they need 4,000 to 11,000 hectares na kanila lang. Yes.
For the two.
Just for the two.
Wow.
Yung parang the air span. Parang gano'n.
Oo, parang territorial sila.
Okay,
So
I
ito,
see.
sa amin lang tong forest, ganyan. So as climate change happens, I guess,
Right.
calamities, pag nauubos yung forest, then you don't expect, like yun, Yolanda nga wiped out their local Philippine eagle population there in Leyte. So congratulations to the DENR and Philippine Eagle Foundation for this successful translocation. We do hope the eagles thrive and we see babies really soon. But for tonight, that's it for the big story for this entire week.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night and have a good weekend.